Alright, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as part of the Rankin Technical College Application and Website Development, or AWD program, and in particular, the AWD 1111.NET Framework class with web databases for the fall 2019 semester, I'm doing a series of video presentations we'll be using based off of the book for that class. The book, as you can see on your screen, is Pro ASP.NET MVC 5, an A-Press text by Adam Freeman. I am into Chapter 14, Overview of MVC Projects. All right. They mention here, I'm in the next section, I'm on page 349. There are two kinds of conventions in an MVC project. The first kind are suggestions. For example, it's convention to put your JavaScript files in the scripts folder. All right, it's where other MVC developers would expect to find them, and it's where NuGet will automatically put them. But you are free to rename that folder. So if you want to call it JS for JavaScript, you could do that. Remove it entirely, or put the scripts in someplace, someplace else. That would not prevent the MVC framework from running your app, as long as the script elements in your views refer to the location that you settled on. The other kind of convention, and this is with separation of concerns, this may be the second most important little principle that we'll talk about in this class. It says the other kind of convention arises from the principle known as convention over configuration. All right? As it says there, what it means is that you don't need to explicitly configure associations between controllers and their views. For example, as it says, if you follow a certain naming convention, everything works. As my friend Doug used to say, it works automagically. All right? There's less flexibility in changing the project structure when you deal with this kind of convention, but since you're basically using that kind of structure, it's one that MVC itself is more familiar with. All right, the author says all of these conventions can be changed if you use a custom view engine, which is covered in Chapter 20, but it's not a step to be taken lightly. All right. These are the conventions, the ones that are showing that really you should get used to using. All right, in the author's opinion and in my humble opinion as well. All right, controller classes must have names that end with controller. You'll see that when you go in and you create your controller, it'll have default controller as the default name and the word as one word, but the default that's in there will, when you first create it, you'll notice that it's in blue, meaning you should change that right away. When you do reference a controller in your project, you don't put the word controller in there in your code. You just put the name. Okay? All right. As it says, you can change this behavior, and they'll discuss that in Chapter 19. So that's controller. Views. Views and partial views should go into the folder views followed by the name of the controller, or in views shared for your more global types of things that aren't associated with the controller. The author says, notice that I omit the controller part of the class from the views folder. It's /views/product, not /views/product controller. All right. As mentioned here, the MVC framework expects the default for an action view to be named after that method. So for instance, if the action method was list, the view that's associated with it should be list.cs.html. And sometimes people will ask, well, what if I don't want that? Can I do it another way? You typically can get around almost anything, but you're making it harder for yourself, and perhaps more importantly, you're making it harder for the software. You don't want to do that. I always, say this, and people think I'm trying to be funny, but I'm really not. That fighting with software is a lot like fighting with your spouse. It doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong, you're wrong anyway. All right, and that's kind of the way, when you fight against the software, you're going to lose. All right. When looking for a view, the MVC framework looks in the folder named after the controller, and then if it doesn't find that, in the views shared folder. This means you can put views that will be used by more than one controller in that shared folder. All right, and the system will find them. We've talked about this before. All right, following conventions for layouts. The naming convention for a layout file is to prefix it with an underscore character. So that should be the first character. All right, these files are placed in the /views//shared folder. As it says here, the layout applied to all views by default, meaning unless you tell it otherwise, is in /views/_viewstart.cshtml. All right, normally that's going to point to _layout.cshtml. If you want to disable any layout for a view, you can just say layout equal null. All right, let's talk a little bit about debugging, and then we'll get into the example project they have for the chapter. You debug an ASP.NET app the exact same way you would do a Forms app. Since we haven't done Forms app, that probably doesn't mean a lot to you. But we have used debugging inside of C# last semester. So the debugger is a powerful and flexible tool. It's got a lot of stuff built into it. And as the author says, you can only scratch the surface. So, to demonstrate the debugger, as the author says here, we'll create an MVC project using the MVC project template. All right, just so you can see how the default stuff is set up. All right, I have called it Debugging Demo. In fact, let's come in here. I don't even need this dummy project, so I'm going to get rid of it. If I'm asked to save, I'll say no. And I'm going to get rid of dummy project 2. I don't need that either. And I'm going to very quickly, hopefully, jump back. And I can't do it from there, so I got to do it from here. All right, to my desktop and get rid of dummy and dummy 2. Dummy solution, I should say, and dummy solution 2. All right, now they're both gone. Okay, so we are going to come in here and start up a new session of Visual Studio. And we are going to come in here and create a new project that will be an ASP.NET web application like this. And the author says that this time, first of all, we're going to call it Debugging Demo, just as the author says. And I'm going to change my solution name to Chapter 14. All right. We will use the MVC template. The author says, just so you can see some of the stuff that's available. All right. And we'll click Create. This allows Visual Studio, as mentioned on the bottom of page 352, to add the default packages, files, and folders the MVC template includes. So as you can see how they work by starting the application. They show this on 353, and literally in a matter of seconds after this is up, good, I'm going to run the program. So I'm just, to run the program, what I'm going to do, I don't know what that is. Oh, that's this file. I'm going to open up Views. I'm going to open up Home. I'm going to right click on my index.cshtml, and choose View in Browser. That will run my program. It looks like well, that's interesting. Goofed up somewhere. Hello. Not sure why that wouldn't work. Let's try one more time from here. If we get an error, it's something goofy that I did. Well, somewhere in there I've got a slash. So I goofed up someplace. So let's come back here. Looks like that's named correctly. But let's come in here anyway and right mouse click on here. Choose Rename. Debugging demo. Okay. If I still get an error, it's in some external file someplace that this is misnamed, and it is. Let's hook on it. Probably a very simple problem and a very simple fix, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here where I've got my program right here. Close this. I'm going to come back up here, and somewhere in here I've got Debugging Demo. Good that you see me make mistakes. All right, you might say, yeah, whatever. Yeah, it is. So I'm going to remove that. I'm going to do this very quickly so I can finish with this lesson. I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to start up a new session of Visual Studio. Alright, we're going to create a new project. It'll be our ASP.NET web application. Alright, it will be called, just to be sure, we'll call it Debugging. We'll call it Debugging Demo 2. And I want the solution name to be the same. All right, how about Chapter 14? We'll call it B. All right, click Create. We want this to be an MVC. Click Create again. I don't see any place where I could have made any kind of mistakes setting all this up, but we're going to see. All right, I'm going to go back in here to Views, Home, right mouse click on Index, choose View in Browser. Hopefully I won't get any errors this time. Okay, there's my beginning project. I'm making it a little smaller here just to show you this picture right here is the same as the picture that's shown here, virtually the same as the picture that's shown on page 353, right there. All right. Notice that was 2013. We're now in 2019. So there are some placeholder elements, etc. All right. I'm going to stop it here and pick it up under creating the controller that you'll see in just a couple minutes.